Good morning and welcome everyone to the first in a series of our Anything in Print webinars. And it's really great to see that we've got a significant number of people joining us today from all areas and all sectors of our business, which is really great. So thank you for joining us and thank you for taking the time out. My name's Tim Carter and I'm responsible for the commercial print division within Ricoh. And I'm genuinely excited today to be joined by two real stalwarts of our industry, Marianne and Charles, CEOs of IPIA and BPIF respectively. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. If you've got any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We'll try to answer as many of these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, we will answer later via email. A copy of today's slide deck and additional help materials are available in the resource list, and we really encourage you to download any resources or links that you may find useful. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. Webinars like these are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. So, now on to the main part of our webinar. As I mentioned, this is a kick-off event to a series of practical webinars we'll be running through May until July, and they'll be covering a range of topics, including advice on managing business transformation, driving more value in the digitally printed page, and developing added value services to core business. Today, though, we've got a really exciting and full agenda, which we focused around the 5-stage McKinsey model, leading from the crisis of today to the next normal that will emerge in the future. We specifically chose the 5 R's: resolve, resilience, return, reimagine, and reform, because we feel it precisely fits the journey that many of our organizations within our industry should consider to take on in these very turbulent times. If we consider what's already happened and what may happen in the future, I suggest we're past now the resolve stage, and probably some of us are well into the building resilience phase. I'm sure we all await the return to business, but it's the future reimagine and reform phase where the unknown really lies. However, I'm confident the insight from both Marianne and Charles, who both bring decades of combined industry experience to the table, will help us begin to plan for the future and the new norm which awaits. Let me set the scene first. Print represents one of the greatest inventions of all time. And let's not underestimate the impact that print has had on society over the years. Since its invention by Gutenberg, it's contributed to the spread of literacy and education around the world, amongst many other advances it can be associated with. It is still the most tangible, the most impactful, and the most sustainable method of communication. In spite of the many challenges and competing digital formats, print and our industry still remains relevant, enduring, and effective. Over the years, print has changed, but more importantly, its purpose has evolved. Today, we can virtually print anything, but our print services go well beyond hardware or even the software that facilitates it. As an industry, we need to work together to consider what print can do to impact the fabric of business itself. And we want to help our industry to communicate the mindset that, together, we can tackle anything in print, especially in these unprecedented times. For years, we've been focused on the digital experience. We've lived through our screens. The novelty of digital isn't wearing off, it's evolving. But as it grows into every part of our lives, it needs enhancing. Now more than ever, we work remotely, we collaborate online, we digest more and more content digitally. But this doesn't mean print has become obsolete. Data would suggest that consumers and society as a whole is now experiencing what is being called digital fatigue. And as a result, we're now experiencing a cultural movement back to a physical experience. For example, look at the resurgence of vinyls in spite of an almost infinite opportunity to download music. Additionally, the average smartphone user will take 150 photos a month. But for those images we want to keep, savor and share, we still output and we still print. So we need to fuse the very best of digital with the physical and continue to promote print as the only unique method of communication that provides that tangible and physical experience. Innovations in print technology play a vital part here. What we can achieve today with a relatively small investment from a printer was unheard of 10 years ago. Print enhancement techniques, including media types, finishing and embellishment, have evolved so much over the last 5 to 10 years, driving more and more value and developing print as a truly complementary media. Let's also remember that our attitude towards digital media and digital marketing has changed as well. Digital media is really good at conveying a message at speed to two parties who trust each other, like email or social media to your followers, but not at a scale when it comes to sharing an important message or building a brand-client relationship. Yet brands continue to spend a significant proportion of their budget on digital-only campaigns. So what additional value can be gained by adding print to the marketing mix to drive brand recognition and brand profile? Also, on average, a person in the UK has multiple email addresses. So how do marketeers know which one to use to target their message and content? Gartner also tells us Gartner also tells us how consumers are getting resilient to personalized email. And 80% of marketeers are expected to abandon personalization by 2025 due to a lack of ROI. And I quote Gartner, "Consumers have developed an increasingly jaundiced eye towards marketeers' efforts to embrace them. Their increasingly cluttered email inboxes and mobile phone notification centers may lead them to ignore even the most carefully personalized and contextualized message." So again, surely this offers a genuine opportunity for print to provide that cut-through that corporates and brands crave, now more than ever. Brands often focus on costs alone, disregarding print as an expansive medium for communication. But as brand profile and recognition is fast becoming the most important metrics for any corporate organization, as an industry, we need to become more assertive and more persuasive that campaigns without print will be severely compromised. Interestingly, and not coincidentally, through the COVID pandemic, government has relied on the power of print and as an essential tool for communication. Whilst we continue to see daily briefings on most news channels and significant content shared across social media, the highest impact communicator agreed by most was the Boris letter printed that arrived through every household's letterbox. So what better endorsement of the power and impact that print still has when complemented with other multi-channel communication campaigns? Furthermore, the adaptability and innovation of manufacturing companies and print service providers alike within our sector have been pivotal in supplying PPE and highly critical products to our NHS. Additionally, the reliance on organisations within our sector to produce and supply highly critical messaging, signage and instructions, again, reinforces the true power of print. No doubt our industry has a knack of dealing with setbacks and bouncing back. it is proven to be highly resilient, and against years of technical and economical change, the industry in the UK still remains an important manufacturing sector, and one which contributes significantly to the UK economy as a whole. But what do we now need to consider, and what will the new norm look like? So I'd now like to welcome Marion and Charles to find out more. Marion and Charles, welcome and thank you for joining me today to share your experience, knowledge and insight into the current and future situation. So Charles, I'd like to turn to you first. I think as CEO of BPIF, with all the great work you do with government and the market analysis and insight you provide, you're uniquely positioned to comment on the current situation. So can you tell us how print service providers can address the immediate challenges for workforce, customers, technology and business partners?
Well, morning, and thank you, Tim. I think to start off, it's worth just thinking back to about how these challenges arose in the first place. Back on the 23rd of May, we collectively had 2 days' notice that the whole of the UK would enter lockdown. And that had immediate implications for our sector. Businesses in leisure, retail and hospitality were required to close immediately, meaning that demand dropped away. We were all told to stay at home if we could, but announcements were also made about exceptions for key workers in essential services, and those really needed interpreting because some of those measures were quite confusing. So these were pretty significant challenges. Firstly, we saw an immediate, rapid change in activity levels for most companies in the sector. Some companies saw their immediate order book fall literally to zero overnight. Others, many others, saw parts of their order book fall, but they also carried out a lot of essential work and they needed to stay open. Finally, some actually remained busy, sometimes even busier, for example, supplying pharmaceutical industry or food distribution or the NHS. So the effect on business and within business was varied. We had to collectively understand what was happening in this very fast-changing situation. Secondly, there was a great deal of uncertainty and confusion about who could and should stay open. A lot of fear that we as a sector would get caught on a kind of blanket, everyone must close message, which would have had immediate and dire implications if you think about, for example, food provision, packaging, on transport, on medical supplies, on the NHS, and even on sectors like defence, where we've got supplying in key aspects of their supply chain. To address these challenges, what PSPs had to do was help us to help government understand their needs and to ensure that where appropriate, they shouldn't close and they could stay open. And this was a really significant risk, and people were very concerned about it in those first few days and weeks. What was also clear, though, was that shutting down much of the economy was bound to affect our sector. So what we then had to do was work extremely hard, very quickly, to ensure that the government placed support schemes to stop mass job losses and business failures. Those schemes, like the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme, like the civil spend scheme, and the ability to defer some payments to government have so far been quite successful, although we would like to see them improved. What we then had to do was ensure that the sector understood how to participate and implement those schemes. We feedback to government how schemes were working and how they could be improved, and we've been doing a lot of that over the last 2 weeks. We've had to ensure that the sector has had the supplies that it needs, and suppliers worked with us to interpret the information and feedback areas of concern to government. So overall, Tim, you know what, it's not been perfect, but we have definitely avoided far worse outcomes. And collectively, we've come through that stage one, that first set of challenges. We're all here, the support schemes are in place, but there are challenges ahead, and we're collectively positioned to deal.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, a great insight. Marianne, could I ask you for your views and whether you'd like to extend on that in any way?
Thanks, Tim, and good morning, everyone. I think, yes, all that Charles said is reflected across the things that we learned. But a couple of things struck out to me. I've been in this industry a long time. I've got lots of friends and colleagues and now members who have been business owners and managers for a long time. I think it was, for me, the big key thing over the last few months has been the uncertainty. I'm talking to people that I've known for a very long time who are very capable business people who just didn't know what to do. They had no idea what to do or what was facing them. So I think the challenge for us as an association was how do we support those business leaders when they themselves don't know what to do. Leading when you don't know the answer, when you haven't got a clue what's coming, is a very difficult thing to do. So I think the first couple of weeks was about a bit of disbelief and panic. What do we do? As Charles has done, we carried out surveys, we talked to our members. We then used that to liaise with government and to try and dissemble the information that they were giving, and also to feed back the information from those business leaders. And I think now we're in an acceptance stage where we've all accepted this, and we're resigned to the fact we're where we are. I think the important thing is what we do next and how we leave this first phase and go into the next phase and into the future. So that's where I see it at the moment, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, a great insight. I appreciate that. And I think from my perspective and from the discussions I've had with customers and prospects alike, I think one thing that is very characteristic about our industry is its resilience and is its ability to change and adapt to times. And I'm sure that this will be no exception. So let's move on. Charles, I'd like to move back to yourself. What can organisations do to truly build resilience for what's to come?
I think that's a great question. And as Marion said, if only we did know what was to come. In the short term, resilience is quite simply about protecting businesses and protecting jobs. We've seen 70% reduction in activity levels across the sector. And actually, our latest survey indicated that something like 12% of respondees had ceased operations during this shutdown lockdown period. What we also saw were workers getting challenged about why they should go to work. Businesses, even the strongest ones, needed to make bold decisions quickly. Fortunately, this is a hands-on entrepreneurial sector, so it did respond incredibly quickly. We were able to provide great information to government on the impact on the sector of potential and actual decisions. And that almost certainly helped head off some even bigger challenges. And quite often we were getting requests from government for information at 11 o'clock in the morning, respond to them by 1 o'clock. To be fair to government, they had to deal with a very difficult situation and they were definitely listening. The government started to put support schemes in place to help businesses weather this storm. The job retention scheme, the furlough, this new word we've all learned, was outlined early on. It was outlined in a very headline. We needed to understand the details, and whilst not perfect, it has been absolutely key to avoiding mass job losses. We think something like 70% of companies in our sector are furloughing workers at the moment. There's this enormous decrease in demand that we've seen. The CBILS, the Business Interruption Loan Scheme, a little bit more problematic, to put it mildly. Access to this additional credit has helped. But again, what we've seen is that of companies applying at the moment, we think about 25% have been successful, about 25% have been unsuccessful, but about 50% are still waiting to hear whether that they will be successful or not. And we've got no end of really tough, challenging stories from members, print companies about getting access to finance. That has definitely eased, and the goalposts have moved significantly. So I would say to anyone listening to this call, if you haven't been successful on applications of those support schemes, do think about reapplying. Notably, the bounce back smaller loan scheme was implemented, and that has had incredibly rapid and significant uptake. So to build resilience, companies have had to all have a hard look at their needs, and they've responded. They've reduced operations. They're protecting their staff with changed and new health and safety rules. They're safeguarding their resources, and that's been key. They've been hunkering down. So we saw an initial stage 1 period of rapid change. Stage 2 was then about adjustment to that. It was about getting used to how things have now become. Can I continue to operate? At what scale do I operate? And how do I do that? What resource do I need to operate? And of course, most importantly, how do I keep my team safe and engaged, both working at home and in the workplace? It's a completely new normal. So these have all been key areas to ensure what may come next.
Thanks, Charles. Marianne, again, could I hand over to you to maybe to add to that or to add and your additional views?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yes, again, we found very similar findings in our surveys and our discussions with our members. But I think the resilience thing has to come from another direction apart from financial. I think, again, going back to the point, how do you lead if you don't know the answer? To build resilience, you need to have a plan. How do you plan when you don't know where the industry is going to be? As Charles said, we don't know at the moment when demand will come back and how demand will come back. So I think using the government support, but using that as part of a structured plan, you need to understand what money is available. For example, if you borrow and you have to put up security for that borrowing, what does that look like for you as a business if your demand doesn't return for 6, 8, 10 months? We've got to run numerous scenarios and actually think to ourselves as business leaders, what if, how do we make sure we're resilient if demand doesn't come back in 6 months, but is there again in 8 to 12 months? And so much of this is dependent on things that we don't have any control over. So I think running those various scenarios and those models is important financially. But it's also, I think, if you're going to build resilience, about thinking differently. Take some time now to think about the things that you want to change in your business and use this time now when you've undoubtedly got to change your business model in some way, whether that be, as Charles said, reducing your capacity, your output, furloughing some of your staff. Use that time to really have a deep dive look at how your business is running. Take the time to look at the things that are profitable and maybe the things that aren't so profitable, and have a good, long, cold, hard look at what your business might look like as you come out. I think resilience comes from, yes, financial support, yes, from looking at where the government is going with that support, and we as trade associations will be lobbying constantly on the industry's behalf, along with Charles, to make sure we get heard. From our side, we've, as you probably may have seen, we've launched something called In the Know, which is a broadcast disseminating information and giving you ideas and support to look at it again. But it is very much a two-way thing. It's not just about finance. It's about having a good plan and looking and being nimble as we go into the next phase of recovery. So that's where I think this is going, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting feedback, and I think that will certainly resonate with our audience today. So thank you for that. Okay, so now let's look into the immediate future and talk about the return to business. Charles, how can organisations plan to return to scale as knock-on effects become clear?
I think, Tim, actually, this is going to be the really tricky bit. Our sector has adjusted. We've battened down the hatches. We've ensured that where we need to keep operating, where we can build more scale, that can be done with access to resources and people in a safe manner. One advantage our sector does have, though, is that it hasn't closed in its entirety. So a lot of this is going to be about scaling back up as much as reopening, and that really helps. The reality is that a significant proportion of demand has gone in the short term. Now, we've seen typically something like a 70% drop in order levels, affecting almost all companies to some extent, some quite drastically. This is a demand-led challenge, and demand will take time to come back. It won't be until all businesses are open again, and even then, we may be in a different world. So what needs to happen? Well, firstly, and most importantly, the support schemes must stay in place and be tapered while demand comes back. If not, the reality is that we'll see some pretty nasty outcomes for businesses and staff, and we're pretty sure that government get that message now. They do hate the price tag, but unfortunately, it's an unavoidable part of the message of managing the public health crisis. They absolutely must avoid a liquidity crisis until back up. And we have real concerns about the additional debt being put in to try and support businesses, because at some point that will need to be paid back. However, at the moment, it's essential to keep businesses going. So support schemes and their adjustments is the primary thing that we need to see. Secondly, operationally, actually, it's going to be all about people, starting with our own staff, but including all stakeholders, suppliers and customers. Information, knowledge and communications is going to be key. Staff are going to have real and profound concerns, and we need to make sure those concerns are aired, listened to, and properly addressed. Safe ways to work, safe ways to address concerns. Health and safety, how it's managed and communicated, will actually be at the heart of this. It's actually, I think, a really good time to show what sort of organisations we all are, to our staff, to our customers and suppliers. The more we can share about good practice and coordinate on this, the better off we're all going to be. So finally, Tim, it's going to be about strengthening all those relationships with clients and suppliers, not only for that safe return to work, but also to help us understand how we can all rebuild our businesses in what is inevitably going to be a very, very different world.
Absolutely. Marion, again, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that the biggest concern, I believe, that people are going to have as they come back, obviously looking after their staff, making sure they can come back to work safely. But cash flow is going to be a huge issue. And although the government support schemes and loans are a great way of bringing cash into the business, as Charles quite rightly said, again, without knowing what the future of the business is and when it will come back, it's really hard to build more debt into a business. It's not what business owners want to do. I think I was talking to a couple of members yesterday who were saying that they are doing everything they can to pay their suppliers, but if they don't get paid, they can't pay their suppliers, and that knock-on effect of cash flow over book debt is going to be really difficult. We actually approached government with a scheme to encourage the banks to lend over book debt in the short term to try and make that intervention in the supply chain so that people can get paid. But it's going to be incredibly tricky, and to me, trickier coming out than it was going in. Going in was hard. Coming out is going to be even harder. But I think, again, this is about thinking of the future. And if we're going to come back, we've got to learn to sell. Our industry's issue has always been that we produce fantastic products and services, but we don't necessarily communicate that to our customers. And I would be saying to people looking to the future, you have to build a robust sales strategy. That isn't a sales strategy where you send somebody in to ask if you can quote on work. This is a robust sales strategy that says we are going to be doing different things, making new products and services, and we want to make sure our customers get that communication. Another thing I think that we'll see a lot of is that we have seen enormous amounts of collaboration. We launched something called the Sourcing Bridge a month or so ago, which was where if a company had furloughed staff and still had work coming in, they might, for example, have furloughed just about everybody in their finishing department, but were still producing print. So how could we connect them with a company that still had a full finishing department? And we've seen a huge amount of those partnerships appearing so that as people bring work back in and work starts to come in, they don't necessarily have to unfurlough all their staff. They can work in partnership with other people. So maybe after the event, if anyone is interested, look at the Sourcing Bridge. That also has become a place where people are offering individual help, individuals who haven't got a job are offering their services to support companies that maybe need a little bit of help, but also longer term partnerships and investment. This might be the time to really look at how you go forward. And it could be you do need to look for a long-term partner. You may need to look for a long-term investor. It may be a time to combine a business with somebody that you know, maybe look to take someone over or work with them. I think that would be a very sensible thing to do in this period as you come out, is to work much, much closer with perhaps people that you looked at as competitors before, but maybe can give you that support you need so you get a robust way of coming back. That to me is, I think, in answer to that question about, how do you come back? I don't think it's as straightforward as thinking business will resume. I think we need to look at that in a number of ways, collaborate, communicate, and also think about selling what we do best in our industry, which is that customer solution. But we need to sell it, not just expect our customers to come and find us. So, yeah, thanks, Tim.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Marion. And now, Marion, staying with you, IPIA rhetoric is very much focused on transformation. So can you provide your view on what the new normal might look like and how to lead a business through what will be a very difficult phase for us?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So as many of you know, this is stuff that I bang on about all the time. We are part of the most amazing industry in the world. In one of our conversations with government, and I think people have heard me say this before, please can you name me an industry in the world that doesn't use print in some form or another. We touch into every single other industry. There is nobody that doesn't use print, I don't believe. And you can send me a Q&A on somebody that you think doesn't use print. So we're affected, our economics are affected as an industry by any seismic shift in any other industry. We have some companies that only work with the leisure and hotel industry. They're devastated. We have other businesses that work with the NHS. They're doing really well. So our industry is a barometer for, I think, the UK economy. And I think that's a really important factor that we need to be shouting very loudly about. We're also very good at technically adapting. We're very good at buying a new widget and making that widget do things that we didn't think it would do. So I'm always amazed by some of the stuff I see in our print members. When you go in and see what seems like a perfectly ordinary print business producing amazing stuff, but it's much harder to adapt to a shift in the entire world market than it is to adapt to a new piece of equipment in your business. And I think for those businesses that will do really well and transform in this phase when we're coming out are going to be those businesses that can actually focus on new products, new services, new ways of doing business. So if the transformation is going to come from you looking differently, I think you need to start with what you do already. Look at areas of your business that maybe aren't as profitable. When I did my consulting time after I sold my print businesses, one of the big things that came to me time and time again was the old thing about turnover being, vanity and profit being sanity. Lots of businesses actually could take their most profitable work and do more of it rather than chasing big, high cost, high risk, low margin work. So I think starting with, if you're going to come out and transform your business, you need to start with a proper, long, hard look at what you do, looking at the most profitable areas of what you do, and then, as I've said before, potentially looking to partner or collaborate in maybe areas that you're weaker. I think as well, one of the things we do well in our industry is that we innovate. So print businesses are very innovative about providing solutions. But I think maybe now is the time to look at how do you commercialize that innovation? How do you, as a business, come up with something innovative, find out how to make that innovation a commercial product, and how do you get that funded? How could you look to get investment or grant money into new innovation? And that's something that you'll see, again, us focusing on as an association, trying to help print businesses that want to innovate, fund that innovation, and understand how to raise money and raise investment into that innovation. I also think that it's essential that we look to invest in sales and marketing. So if we look at the fact that a lot of businesses now are looking to produce PPE, and I've seen some wonderful stories about businesses in the print industry unfurloughing staff in order to make PPE for the national health. As every business in the country goes back to work, the call on PPE and to provide PPE is going to be massive. But if we're honest, most small businesses, most restaurant chains or small factories wouldn't necessarily look to the print industry to be able to provide that for them. So this is the time when we need to communicate to our customers that there's so much more to us than just ink on paper. Let's tell our customers that our industry is producing PPE and can help them. And if as a business you don't want to or are not able to produce PPE yourself or products and services that would support the COVID fight, why don't you partner? We've already seen a number of paper suppliers, and one in particular, one paper distributor in particular, coming up with a range of COVID products that can be resold by printers out to their customers. But what our challenge is going to be making sure that those customers know that they should be looking to their local printer to help them. We can print screens, we can print the anti-sneeze guards, we can print stuff for retail, stickers on the floor, distancing, posters. But we need to make sure that we're the first port of call for those customers. So my message in this is that if we want to come out and transform our business and our industry, it's going to be about communicating and getting hold of those customers and telling them loud and clear that we are the place to come to get that support. Again, on our side as an industry, as a trade association body and in support of the industry, our Heroes group that we launched last year is going to be talking very, very loudly out to the marketing agencies, out to the procurement world. We're already in contact with other trade associations in that world to say, please make sure that your members know they can buy this stuff through the print industry. And I would encourage every small business listening, even if you can't make new products and services, look around and see who can supply you so that you can resell and reach out to your customers with whole new product lines. In turn, some of those products you'll be able to produce yourself, but don't just limit yourself to what you know today. Learn something new, get hold of something new, and try and transform your business through innovation, not just by trying to do what we did before. If we'd known in March, or let's say if we'd known in January that someone was going to press the pause button on our industry and give us time to redefine and reinvent ourselves while they paid the wages, we wouldn't have believed it was going to happen. Please, please don't waste this time. Let's look at how we can support our own industry and help ourselves. We can't just rely on government help, although however wonderful that is, and it has been great. To come out of this successfully, we've got to transform ourselves and make sure that we do the work to inform our customers about what we can actually provide to support them. That'll be how those businesses grow. So, Tim, to me, it's about communication and that transformation into new products and services that we tell our customer about.
Thanks, Marianne. And clearly there's a huge amount of passion in the way you communicate as well, and that's very, very evident. So thank you for that. And I think one of the things that resonates with me as well, and I'm sure with the audience, is the absolute need for innovation through this process and beyond. Charles, is there anything else that you would like to add to that based on what Marianne's spoken about around the next difficult phase and business transformation?
No, I kind of strongly agree with the message that Marianne's kind of delivered there. This is actually an industry of sort of entrepreneurs. It's highly adaptive. There are 8,000 companies in the sector. Most of them are small and medium sized, and they are highly adaptable. I think the PPE example is a classic situation where we saw that. Within days, we were all getting contacted by PSPs saying, I've got this equipment, I can make PPE. Who do I talk to? What do I need to do? And actually, that's been remarkably effective. I think in terms of transformation, though, and leading in the new normal, I have one point that I would make, and I think that I think it's incredibly important to look at the world as it's likely to become, not as it was actually. And we have seen a significant change. We saw significant change when internet and digital came in, and that transformed our clients and our customers' behaviour, and that's had a profound effect on our industry. I think we're looking at something maybe not quite so significant, but it's going to be pretty close actually. We're going to see working from home. We're going to see a lot more use of technology. And so there's going to be a behavioural change for quite a period of time. And that may also create opportunities for print companies. What it does mean is that we can't just carry on before. So we need to look at what that world's going to be like and think about what that means for our businesses. And in some ways, that presents an opportunity, Tim.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Charles. Thanks for the insight. And final question for me, back to you, Marianne. You'd previously mentioned to me that there's been no better time to stop and rethink the future. You'd spoken a little bit about it before, but can you just elaborate a little bit further?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I will find distressing in all of this, and I think lots of people in the world think that, is that we have pressed a pause button on the way we work. We've pressed a pause button on some of our thoughts and the way we view the world. And I would be very disappointed if we didn't take some of that on board and go forward. So for me, this is time to learn new things. If I press that pause button in March, what would be the things in the industry that I would personally like to change, and how could we go about that? And if everybody thought a bit about that, I think it would lead to some great ideas. So, for example, one of the things that in this industry, which is, as we all know, is low margin and high risk on jobs that that can be of high risk. If the margin's small and the job is large, it's a high risk. So I've been learning about smart contracts and blockchain to look at whether that's something that we should be adopting in our industry. And I would again advise you all to learn up about some of this stuff. It's fascinating to see how other industries and other countries have adopted those things. It's not something necessarily that I would have started to look at if it hadn't been for this time to pause and stop. How might that work? And also putting myself into the shoes of other industries that we support. Those industries are going to be having the same conversations as we're having. But as I said before, this is a time of reflection. So we know that we touch every other industry. As an industry, we need to reach out to other industries and see what we can do to help their new normal. So if people are not travelling in to work so much and are working at home, if maybe for the next year, schools are being staggered with what they do, how could we help that? So one other example I'd like to give you is that we've been working with Twinkle, who are a worldwide company that supply packs into teachers. They're doing a huge amount to supply resources for parents into homes, and working there, trying to support Twinkle in getting its support out for children at home has been a real eye-opener for us as the IPIA. But it's brought into a collaboration which has been really interesting for all of us to see how we support each other. I think that we've got to stop and reflect not only on our own personal lives, but our business lives, but also the impact that we all have on the environment. So again, going back to blockchain, I think you'll see in the future many, many companies demanding a much more stringent approval and use of environmentally sound practices. And I think, again, it's something that, although I know that we as an industry are very, very hot on this, how do we communicate that to our customers and address their concerns? This is a real time of reflection that if we get this right, will open up unparalleled opportunity for us. And finally, I think that some of our old established prejudices need to drop. We've seen a huge amount of work from some of the print managers, and I'm not talking about necessarily the very big print management companies here, but some of our member print managers, they are doing a sterling job of approaching their customers to use every single bit of the expertise in the print industry and really driving those messages home in care homes, in social housing, in hospitals, NHS. I think rethinking some of those relationships, how do we actually work together rather than being competitors? If any of you have watched the stuff we've done with Peter Docker about becoming worthy rivals, I think our industry has a real opportunity to work together to deliver one absolutely clear message about how much we can support the industry and therefore the country as we come out of this lockdown and go into the next phase. It's a time of reflection, but it's also a time we could get some great activity going to really, really support the whole of the industry and economy. So yeah, to me, it's an opportunity, and I want to see us come out even more robust and even more proactive. Please, as watch out for what we're all doing. And Charles is doing lots, we're doing lots. We're here to support the industry, and we want to be there to make sure that our message gets out to our potential customers, that we are here for not only for the business they expect from us, but for new business as well. So yeah, time of reflection, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. And any final words from you, Charles, with regard to rethinking the future and using this time to plan and prepare for what the new norm may look like?
Yeah, I think, Tim, some organisations are busier than ever, but the reality is that, as I said, most businesses have seen a downturn in demand. Let's hope that that's short term, but that does create a little bit of time and space to step back from the kind of hurly-burly of business and life generally, and reflect on what really matters and what's important. I think Matt made the point about learning new things. That's been really interesting to see. I mean, as you probably know, we train a huge number of apprentices across the sector. Over 90% of apprentices in the sector remain fully engaged in their learning, and they're learning remotely very often. Even on furlough, they continue with this. I think organisations have been really creative in looking at how they continue to engage with home workers, actually, not just using technology, but actually also online courses and providing an opportunity for their home workers to learn new skills as well. I think all those things help us be resilient and adaptive to a very, very uncertain future. I think the CBI coined the phrase, but they came up with this phrase of build it back better. So not carrying on as we were before, but looking at where are those opportunities going forward? How is the world changing? I think some of the trends are probably accelerated in this process, and it's working out how we can make the most of those opportunities. And we're already seeing that happen in some circumstances.
Thanks. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, Marion. Yeah, wow. You know, what a huge and what an unprecedented insight that you provided us, both of you. Thank you very much for now. Not only in terms of the content and the insight you provided, but the passion and the energy that you've demonstrated throughout the course of this webinar, I think is evident for all to see and hear. So again, thank you for now. We will be coming back to some more Q&A at the end of the webinar, but genuinely thank you for your feedback and the insight that you provided to us all. And I'm sure that that insight will help our audience with what will be a critical decision-making process that they will need to go through throughout this process until we start to return and recover the industry to some form of normality. So we can print anything, but our print services go well beyond hardware or even the software that facilitates it. We can start by talking about what we have, but more importantly, where you are in your journey and offer consultancy to your customers. It's not just print hardware that we can provide, fix or optimize. And it's certainly not just about creating more capacity to drive commoditization. It's value added to anything in print. Whether you're seeking to embrace existing software or technology, reorganize your data, explore new areas of development for your business, or simply realize a dream of providing creative, intelligent, or bespoke printing services, at Ricoh, we're here to help and tackle anything in print, now and in the future. So together, let's influence the next normal. We generally welcome the opportunity to follow up and discuss our extensive range of products and solutions. And furthermore, the continued extensive innovation and development programs at Ricoh will not only support your short-term business strategies and goals, but also the longer-term opportunities that produce and create print that will stand out and provide differentiation and, importantly, drive value. So please get in touch via the normal channels and also online to download the content from today, plus all the extensive content that we've got in our library to help your business thrive and prosper. I'd also encourage you to look out for the follow-up webinars that we'll host through May, June and July, again designed to provide insight, inspiration and support. So that concludes the formal part of our webinar this morning, and thank you all for participating and listening in. We genuinely hope that the structure and the content we've been able to develop and to share with you has been useful. But we encourage you to and ask you to ask questions during the course of the webinar, and with the time that we have now available, we'd like to have a look at those and answer as many of these questions as we possibly can. So we'll start from the top. This is a question from Joe. Interested to know what the panel think about the new COVID secure workplace guidelines from government. So Charles, would you like to answer that one first?
Good question, Joe. It's fair to say that the initial announcements have been a little bit mixed in the messaging. The guidance, I think number 8 workplaces came out, eight guidance for workplaces came out yesterday. We've gone through those. I think we've got a summary. We should have a link on our website, and we can provide those as a resource to this webinar if there's a way to facilitate that later on. Joe, I think the key aspect, just back to this point I was making, which is about a lot of it for our sector, for manufacturing, is going to be about managing the health and safety aspects, actually, particularly around the risk assessments. I I think that's probably pretty sensible. There is a strong emphasis on risk assessments. I think, as I said before, staff have really significant concerns, and not just them, it's their families and those they're connected with. And so there is a very difficult balance to strike. Staff have to be looked after, their concerns need to be listened to, but we do need to try and get the economy opened up again. So overall, I've read through them fairly quickly. I think they're fairly sensible as things stand. There will be areas of ambiguity, though, and we'll continue to work with government and with the sector to clarify those.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Hopefully that answers the question, Joe. Next question from Danny. Can the panel see any green shoots for the industry in the UK at this time? And what are they? Marianne, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, so ever the optimist, I do see things. I won't underestimate the challenge facing businesses getting back, though. But I think that more than ever, we've got the opportunity to say to marketeers and people who communicate that print is the most trusted way of getting your message out there. And I think that this will accelerate some of the things that the industry has been looking at for some time. I think it's a time to reflect on investment and where you invest and how you invest. So it may be that you make your move to digital quicker. It may be you start looking at cross-media and integrated communications. But I think there are green shoots. We've, in our membership, seen people who have quite literally unfurloughed people because they're starting to print signage and screens for retail and for cafes and bars. I think there is some real opportunity. Make no mistake, as the rest of the country comes out of lockdown, they really are going to need us, and it's going to be an opportunity to be taken. I'm just concerned we don't miss it by not communicating that well enough. So yeah, green shoots, but we need to communicate what we do better.
Thanks, Marion. And from my perspective as well, similar to Marion, I'm ever the optimist, and I've spoken to lots of companies over the last 6 or 7 weeks, and there has been, I would suggest, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, some initial signs that there are green shoots. That building upon the comments that Marion made, we're starting to see people to return to work. We're starting to see employees come out of furlough to support growth in the volumes that are required. So I think it is very early stages, but the signs do look encouraging, and let's hope that they all, that continues as we move beyond this next phase. So next question is from James. How do you suggest printers looking to support their business by transitioning to products related to COVID, PPE, etc., don't get seen by customers as capitalizing on a disaster? Good question. Marion, do you want to answer that one first?
Necessity is the mother of invention. I think this is all about how you position your offering. And I think if we don't do it, somebody else is going to have to. I think you can position it more as being there to support your customers as they return, rather than you're just trying to sell more products and services. But make no mistake, I would rather see our industry capitalise and make money from it than any other industry. But yes, sensitive branding, sensitive marketing messages about how you're there to support your customers. They will have to buy this stuff from somebody. So let's make sure it's from us and done in a way that shows the quality and the service that we can put behind that, rather than just selling cheap product. So I think the people who are in the wrong here, and it's been reported lots of times in the media, are people who've been falsely trying to supply shipments coming in from abroad that aren't what they're meant to be. That's where the issue is, not decent, good print businesses supplying great products to customers. To me, that's just supportive of our customer base rather than being exploitative. But yes, let's us make the money. Let's us make sure our businesses are looked after as well in this.
Absolutely. Agreed. Thanks, Mariam. Tony asks, what advice would you give to get back to sufficient turnover within 6 months? Charles, would you like to handle that one?
I think, well, That's two areas. I think that demand. There's two sides. There's demand, and then there's managing resources. On the demand side, it's engaging with your clients. It's engaging with your suppliers. I think particularly with your clients. Some of those businesses have been closed down. Some of them will have been affected by other businesses that have closed down. And the more that we can understand what's happening with our clients, the better place we will be to anticipate what their needs are likely to be going forward. Now, the reality is that demand is going to take time to come back. It's not going to come back overnight, but it will come back, and it will come back fairly strongly. Whether it will come back to where it was before, I don't know. But the question was sufficient demand. It will come back, I think, into this autumn, probably quite strongly. What's really important, though, is that then resources, and particularly financial resources, unfortunately, are managed carefully in that process. And that's why I've been talking so much about those support schemes and need for government to help out there, because scaling back up does place financial pressure on businesses. So we need to see that support. We need to make sure that the resources are there, that a liquidity problem is avoided, so that you can all build operations back up as demand comes back.
Thanks, Charles. Question from Kelvin. How important do you think it is to have an online presence as we embrace the new normal? Maybe both, if you'd like to kick off, Charles, and then Marian can add her comments as well.
I think for the great majority of businesses, it's absolutely critical. I think bluntly, as a sector, this is a huge generalization. There's significant scope for improvement. Some organizations are absolutely brilliant at it. Others are less good. It is vitally important. I think that this period that we've been going through has accelerated the need to engage across several different channels. So, yeah, critically important.
Marianne, I think you're going to be fairly biased given your past history, but interested to get your views as well.
I think it's essential, and I think especially if you look at what we said previously about selling new products, not only are you going to need to have a robust way of selling online, which I think is essential, you're going to need to be able to advertise those products online effectively, so have a proper strategy for online marketing as well as offline marketing. But also, if you are not manufacturing yourself and you are buying to resell, it's even more important that your suppliers have robust ordering processes. So, yeah, I think that online presence is essential, but it does have to go hand in hand with a robust sales and marketing plan and an understanding of where your customers are going to find your products and services. The thing that always works for me whenever you talk about online, will every transaction be online? No, I don't believe it will be. But you need to make it easy to do business with you. So a combination of a great relationship and then a very, very easy way of placing and managing an order, I think is essential. So for all those skeptics out there, I say, yes, you'll need a great, robust website, but don't lose that personal connection that you have with your customers. But then when you've got that, make it really, really easy for them to order from you so they don't go off and get lured elsewhere to place a quick order somewhere. So yes, in essence, very essential, but needs to be managed as part of a longer term strategy.
Thanks, Marianne. In the interests of time, I think we've got time for one more question. But please rest assured, those questions that we haven't answered during the webinar, we will send a response back via email. That there has been quite a lot of interest and a lot of questions asked, and we only have a limited time. So the last question comes from Lucy. How do you think printers can market themselves better? If I can ask you for your response first, Marianne.
I think at all is rather than better. So again, anyone who knows me and has seen me speak before, we have very limited sales and marketing skills in the industry. I believe in general, there's some notable exceptions. So I think that I think to partner maybe and find support that there is out there. We know lots of collaborations that have gone on recently with small marketing agencies working with the printers in order to market their products and services. I think what I said previously about ensuring that you have a joined up strategy for both your on and offline marketing, and be very careful that you don't try and be all things to all men. You need to come up and understand who you're trying to talk to and what you're trying to say. And again, because our previous sales in the print industry has always been about, can I give you a quote and can I do it cheaper? I think it's time for printers to invest in a better understanding of marketing and a better understanding about how that marketing can be applied across our sector. Again, a quick plug for us. We've got some great courses with the CIM coming up, which will help printers to really understand the basics of marketing. But again, this is a time to learn new stuff and look at new stuff. So I think upskilling, partnering, and taking a different view from where you've been before about how you can get your message out there. You need to have a social media presence. You need to have an online presence. And you need to marry that with your business's overall marketing strategy. And if you haven't got one, now is the time to develop one. And if you need help on that, look to partner, look to find a marketing agency that can help you.
Thanks, Marianne. And finally, Charles?
Yes, another good question, Lucy. I think there's a couple of points I'd like to make. First and foremost, it's about using experts, which I think Marianne's touched on. It's hiring experts, it's accessing experts, it's getting expert advice. It's about upskilling as well and using training. And again, we've got training courses, the IPIA have got training courses. So I think first and foremost, it's actually not trying to bluff it. It's learn how to do it and actually maybe be a bit more open to using experts, bringing experts into your business to help you. And I think it's thinking more broadly. There's something that we ought to be thinking about doing as a trade association and with the IPA and the GPMA, which is a wider group of graphic arts trade associations. As we look towards this kind of new normal, I think we need to be talking to government about what they aim to do to help our sector help access those experts, actually, because resources are going to be tight. There's a great opportunity for government to help create an investment-led recovery from this process, but they will need to help support our sector, for example, to pay to bring experts in to help in these processes and to buy equipment and technology to deliver new services.
Thanks, Charles. And I would add to the comments that both Marianne and Charles have made in terms of what printers can do to market themselves better. I think it's absolutely critical that the time that we have at the moment is used to consider an innovative business strategy and to consider an appropriate partner who's going to provide you with that technology that acts and behaves like a partner and not just supplies you for the technology for the sake of the technology. So I think that will now conclude the initial or Q&A session, but please rest assured, any unanswered questions, we will certainly look to send you a response via email. So with that, I'd like to wrap this session up. It's the first of a number of sessions. Please look out for the future sessions that we're gonna hold through May, June, and July. I'd like to take the opportunity, firstly, to thank Marianne and Charles for their insights, for their wisdom, and for the passion and commitment in delivering the message and the content today. And I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today in what we hope has been insightful, enjoyable, and will certainly have value in helping you to make those critical business decisions that will be required between now and when we return to some form of normality. And finally, I'd just like to wish everyone safety and health and happiness. Thank you very much.
Thank you.